Fred, on this episode, I want to talk about some old cases. I got all these notes and I got all these books that I read, and it's like I saved them up for the show here because I got to do a lot of research when I write a book. But before we get into some of this, though, you're the cryptozoology director for MUFON. So what have you been up to? Where are you at? And what are you trying to accomplish?
Well, first of all, we're still working on where we're going to put the files up.
Okay.
And,
you're talking about physical files of the investigations and everything?
The investigation files, right.
Yeah.
Looking at MUFON's records back to 1995, I feel we got about 1,000 cases to be investigated. So
with entities?
With cryptoids and entities.
Okay.
All right. A lot of people, when we started this, thought that we was out hunting Bigfoot and everything else. We're not hunting anything unless it actually is part of a UFO somehow. Like we're looking at entities seen inside an object only through doors, ports, clearly domed. Association is explicit. Entity observed getting in and out of an object. Entity observed the immediate vicinity of a UFO, but not getting into it or out of it. Entity observed independent of the object, although there are UFO activity in the area at that time. Association is circumstantial. Entity observed independent of UFO with no evidence of UFO activity in the area at that time. Some manner of communication experienced during close encounters, although no entity is actually observed. And witness experience is an onboard situation, either voluntarily or by abduction. Entities may or may not be present, but their presence is implicit, if not explicit.
Okay. Well, so you're saying that we're not trying to take over Bigfoot investigations, so the
no,
Bigfoot groups and the Bigfoot hunters.
Right. I mean, they got their own thing. I mean, I do, as you can see right there in front of me, I have two casts right here, a Bigfoot casted. This one here was taken up in Allegheny, up in North Park, here in Allegheny County. And this one here was in Butler. I still do those, but anything with this, it has to exactly be in the UFO field, or we won't do the investigation there.
So we're not changing our name from MUFON to MUFOOT?
No, we're not. Not this week anyhow. You never know. Next
but
week.
You did say one of those, like second or third to the end there, that you mentioned that if there's an entity and there's no UFO present, right? But they may just notify us, so we'll do the investigation, but we're not out soliciting this stuff.
Right. If they call into MUFON, we'll do the investigation. Like you did an investigation in West Virginia back a couple of years ago, a lady that worked for Homeland Security, if you remember that, where she seen entities down in Charleston.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, she called in another one right after that.
Okay.
Which is very interesting. You did yours, you put down not enough information, that's the way you closed it out.
Yeah. When
the report came again, she went up to, I think, Michigan, then she came back down again, and she was in a hospital in South Carolina.
Okay.
And when I investigated, and all of a sudden it just put a big clamp on it.
Okay.
Like wasn't allowed to talk or say anything to me again or whatever. So I think they're out there, as Daryl said. They're there. I mean, it's like, to talk about what else, real quick here, the grave down there. We're doing research down in Wetzel County. We got a grave down there we're looking at, okay? We believe that there are Bigfoot in the area down there, okay? There have been UFO sightings in that area. So does that have any connection with it? I mean, this grave, what is the grave? I mean, I'm not digging the damn thing up, you can believe that.
Yeah.
But I mean,
I wouldn't disturb the grave, I tell you that much, I would not.
There is something there. I mean, it's 5 miles back in the woods, John, and every day we go there, it's clean. It's like somebody sweeps it off every day. There's no leaves on it or nothing. The whole area around it is leaves, dead leaves and that, but nothing on this grave. And it's a different
soil, you said, right? A different color,
different color soil too.
Yeah, it's some strange stuff. I've said, recently, based on what happened to me, that there is some sort of spiritual thing going on, especially when you look at the Native Americans. You look at all these different cultures, and I think the abduction thing, there's more to it than people in spacesuits and spaceships.
Right.
There's another side of it that I think is the majority
Right.
of it. And, I want to delve into the Native American beliefs now
Well, I
with
think-
these spirits and UFOs.
The thing with this thing down there, we took pictures, like I showed you the picture of the claw marks in the tree
Yeah.
down there. The other guy with me, I call him 2 Mile, he took pictures of a pole by the grave. There was also somebody put a pole in the grave, a big tree. It's actually put in. It
Yeah.
wasn't grown there. And they blew the picture up. And when you blow the picture up, you can't see it, but if you blow it up, it actually looks like a Native American standing there,
Huh.
which is amazing. So again, there may be Native Americans buried there, but who's taking care of it? Is
Yeah.
Bigfoot taking care of it? I mean, I don't know. I mean,
That,
but to get there, this is the thing, but to get there, there's timber rattlers all over. And we had to shoot one the other day, about a month ago, which it's $2,000 fine.
I was going to say, is that legal?
Well, I'm going to tell you, that thing was right at me. I mean, it was either me or him, and it
Yeah.
ain't going to be me, believe me.
Yeah.
But I mean, he was about yay round and 5.5 feet.
Jeez.
And they're all over the place down there. So the thing is, to get to where these things are going, where we're going, we got to go through all this area with these rattlesnakes, and then they're all around the grave too. So I mean, again, I don't know. I mean, so.
That's very interesting. Okay. Hey, you know what? Let's talk about a West Virginia case. I do a radio show on Live Paranormal, and I had Frank Fascino on. He don't have Skype. He still has Web
Right.
TV.
Right.
Web TV, so he doesn't have Skype. But
Well, he
we'd have him.
lives down in Florida.
Yeah, he's in
down the
Florida
back
now.
down
Yeah,
there.
he spoke. I'm trying to get him up to Pittsburgh. That would be a cool presentation on Flatwood, since West Virginia's right next door.
He lives down there when they have Bike Week. He lives right next to one of the big bars down there.
Oh, is he? Okay. Is that Daytona? Is that where he's from?
Daytona, yeah.
Yeah,
Right
okay.
outside of Daytona.
Well, I just had him on. It was interesting. My first lecture I ever gave was in Charleston with Stanton Friedman and Frank Fascino. We were at the 2008 Flatwoods case. And I wish they would do the Flatwoods conference again. They do the Mothman. But Flatwoods is also an important case. It really deals with three things.
Well, as I was telling you earlier, they're having the Flatwoods conference. It's the 12th is when the ship allegedly crashed down there.
Yeah.
And I think that's on a Monday or Tuesday night.
So they're doing it
having
the actual
something down
day,
there.
on a
They
Tuesday?
informed me of it, but
Yeah. All right. Well, maybe they can make a bigger deal out of it on the weekend or something. Nobody's going to show up on a Tuesday unless it's just locals. But his research, and this is his book, Fred. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's
I have the other one.
huge, and it's 400 pages. Do you have this?
I have the other book.
Oh, okay.
The newer one.
Yeah, he just said he put out a newer version of it. But, he deals with three issues. One was Korea and what was going on with our airplanes and our pilots. The other is the UFOs over D.C. in 1952 in July, and then the Flatwoods case in September of 52. And, it was really interesting. He called it the Summer of the Saucers in 1952. I asked him, how did you get involved in this case? I mean, I thought he was from New York. He's got a heavy accent. Turns out he's from Connecticut. But his relatives lived down in Flatwoods.
Right.
And he would go to visit for the summer and stuff, and they would tell him about this case, which was the way that he got involved. So, he mentioned that the Flatwoods occurred 6 weeks after Truman gave the order to shoot them down. So that was July 28th. That was the UFOs over D.C. And it's still a standing order where Truman said, if you can't talk them down, shoot them down. I don't know how you're going to talk them down. Like, what language would you use? And do you really want to shoot at these things, But he mentioned something that was really interesting. He said that around that time with Flatwoods was the first time that we went from fighter jets with bullets to rockets. And, he said he spoke to Stanton Friedman, who's going to be here in Pittsburgh November 19th to speak at our conference. But, Friedman said that, they're smart enough to know to stay a certain distance from the bullets because the bullets they'll drop off. So the first time we started shooting rockets at them at 2,500 miles an hour, it probably caught them by surprise. They didn't know we had that technology. And that's where Frank says we got into really an air battle with UFOs in 1952.
Right.
And that's why I say the Korean side and the work he did with looking into records with the Air Force, he found that we lost 83 planes over Korea in the war. We lost 62 planes over the United States. Think about that. How could you lose 62 in training missions? Nobody's shooting at you, supposedly, but then you lost 83 in the actual battle and 62 here in the United States. And he says the odd thing was, and the records are there, the pilots didn't eject, which means they were shot down. If you weren't able to eject, they were taken out. So really, really interesting book. He put a map together where he shows UFOs over 10 states and 112 UFO encounters.
Well, one thing also he was saying when I was talking to him when he was at the last conference, allegedly one crashed down in Willing, down by Oglesby, and it's called the thing was called Bashful Billy.
Okay.
Where they actually found something that was burned to death, and the government came in and said it was actually a woman, and they took the body. So he's saying that actually one crashed down in Oglesby too, back at the same time it crashed in Flatwoods.
Okay. Well, the other thing he mentioned was they had 180 National Guard there, and he's interviewed a lot of them. So he's got some good information. And that's the one thing with Kecksburg. Where are the 30 military people? But guess what happened? Just 2 weeks ago, a guy contacted us through MUFON headquarters that he knows who the senior investigator was, a lieutenant colonel. His name was Harold Rawson from Paris, Maine. He was the senior investigator there with the Army, and that he would tell them, they were friends of the family, that he was there. He told them about the case. He thought it was a Russian satellite. He was told that. And he actually, before he left the Army, he destroyed all the records. So, and apparently he got in trouble for doing that, but he said, you think about the time period, he didn't want a Gary Powers YouTube type, U2 encounter with Russia, because we were spying over Russia. So that tells me it was a spy satellite. Not that it was an alien craft, but we found the guy. Finally, we found at least one named officer who was there, and this guy was.
Where he's at?
He's dead now. He died 3 years ago, but he's from Paris, Maine. So it's not 100%, but we got it. Frank also said that drawing of it, where it was in a hooded dress type outfit with claws and all of that. He said that. That kind of was like somebody drew that and the media picked up on it from the descriptions, but the thing was actually floating in a metallic machine that was levitating is what it was. So he goes, that really, and then it splashed oil all over that woman, Mrs. May. Right.
A lot of people think it was actually a reptilian.
Yeah, well, some sort of reptilian in some sort of craft or whatever. But you talk about the sulfur, and even the claws, the had a green face, red eyes, whatever it was, and a hooded. You get back into the demonic side of this thing, which shows up more and more if you're looking at it. He said, I asked him, what was the official Blue Book explanation for it, or Air Force military explanations? He said it was a meteor, but then they checked and there were no meteors that night, none. And then they said, well, it was a large 6-foot owl. That was the explanation. So and we didn't really get into it. He said the following night there was something went on in Frametown. And we didn't really get to talk about that. And he wanted to talk about Albert Bender, but we never really got to that.
But one thing about that, where did the craft go? Where was the craft when May and them went up there? And then where did the craft go?
I don't think they got that far, because they came to a mound, and then that thing came over, it was hovering at them, and they turned and they said the dog ran forward, and then all of a sudden the dog turned around and came running back and ran right past them, ran all the way back to the house. That would have been the first sign let's get out of here.
Right.
You know, that's what they should
Didn't
have.
the dog die though, later on or something?
You know, I don't know. I don't know if it died prematurely or anything, but
And they were taken to the hospital. A couple of them were taken to the hospital.
yeah, well, that was
for
the
their
other thing. They
treatment.
started vomiting because of
Right.
that heavy sulfur smell or whatever was coming off of this, and it could have been some sort of exhaust or whatever however the thing was being levitated. But you know, that was an interesting case.
But you know, a lot of times, why is it that they affiliate UFOs with sulfur? You know, Bigfoot smells like sulfur a lot
I
of
know.
times. A lot of your aliens, I mean, your cryptids smell like sulfur. So there's got to be something involved in that.
And when you look into the religious side with the demonic, it's the
Right.
sulfur smell. And you see, nobody wants to look into that end of it. You know, is this more biblical or is it extraterrestrial? But every time, that's a key word for me now. When there's sulfur involved, like the Men in Black with
Right.
Albert Bender, they smelled of sulfur. So what were they? You know, so that's one case.
But,
Here's
you know, getting back
Yeah.
to that with Bender with the Men in Black, good case down in West Virginia. Teets investigated it. There was a cemetery down there, and every time that a new body was put in, within 2 days, there would be a UFO hovering over the grave. And if you look at the Men in Black when they first started out, they all had makeup on. They wore suits that actually looked like what the Undertakers put on you when you
Yeah.
die. Is it possible they were actually taking the DNA out of there and making them Men in Black?
you know, there's three versions of the Men in
Yeah.
Black.
I mean, you know,
You know,
really. I mean,
you got the ghoulish version,
Yeah.
you got the alien version,
Right.
and then you got the CIA version.
Right.
You know,
So-
so who
were
knows
they?
what's the truth with it,
Right.
you know? But this is a case I've been holding on to. Nick Redfern wrote this article last year, actually, and I never got to talk about it. It's the Kelly Hopkins case in Kentucky. But this is another one that gives a ridiculous military explanation, and I'll get to that in a second. But August 15th of 1950. Well, we heard the granddaughter speak
Right,
in
yeah.
Cincinnati,
Yeah,
right?
right.
She told us about
Yeah.
the case at the symposium. What happened was the Sutton family, they had visitors from Pennsylvania, went to Kentucky to visit them. Billy Ray Taylor and his wife, I love the names, you know. It was about 7 o'clock. The dog started to bark and growl, really aggressive, uncontrollable. So Sutton and Taylor armed themselves with shotguns, and they headed out to see what was going on. They saw these small silver creatures, about 3 foot tall, long ape-like arms that almost went down to their ankles. They were goblin-looking with big heads and these big ears, almost like a dog's when his ears
Right.
are up. Big ears. They shot it with the shotgun. It had no effect. It would hit the creature, knock him down. He would just pop back
Right,
up
right,
again.
right.
You know, almost like they were being taunted by them. The creature then, they went back in the house. They saw it through the window. They shot it, blew the window out. They went outside, which was a huge mistake. And the creature was up on top. And he went outside and they reached down and grabbed him by the hair. So he was able to pull away from that. And then he looked up, and there was a second one up in the tree branch that was looking at him. You know, they just started shooting at these things. The creature floated down.
Right.
They said it floated down to the ground. Now, this was actually the basis of the movie Signs. This, you know, if that whole scenario being on the roof and running across the roof, that was the whole thing with the Signs movie. They made a run for it. They got and they went to the sheriff's office in Hopkinsville. The sheriff came out there. There was no creatures. But then after the police left, the creature showed back
Came
up.
back again, right?
And then the military and the media got involved in this thing. And the Air Force's final explanation with this was that these goblin aliens were actually monkeys painted silver that escaped from a traveling circus, which nobody could find this traveling circus.
Right.
And even J. Allen Hynek said that, you know, when you shoot monkeys, even if they're painted, they die.
They fall.
They don't just bounce back up like a rock'em sock'em robot.
I think the government's been lying about this since the beginning of time. I mean, and
Absolutely.
again, I will say I believe that there's a lot of extraterrestrials in the government, and they're actually protecting their own.
Yeah, well, you know, I never believed that, but, you know, with the David Icke stuff, but the more you read this and think about it,
Right.
you have to wonder, is
Yeah.
that, Have they infiltrated? Because there is clearly a push for this one world government,
Right.
for this socialism. It seems like a concerted effort to take down Western civilization, which has made people profitable and successful, and you know.
And you know, another thing is interesting. There's a big push right now for everybody to buy gold, to get gold.
Well, yeah, my brother's
Okay.
involved in that.
Okay,
Yeah.
but if you look back in the day, wasn't it the aliens come down and had mined the gold on this planet?
Yeah.
Is it possible that they want to get all the gold there is in one place and they're actually coming back to pick it up?
It could be,
They may
except
need
by
it.
people buying gold, they're
Right.
pulling it away.
Right, well.
You know, and
But once
it's
they
in
pull it
everybody's
away, who's to
house.
say the government ain't gonna come and say we want it?
Well,
They know who has it then.
FDR
Yeah,
took all the gold back
Right.
in World War II, right? It was illegal to own gold, so he confiscated it
but
all.
like now they don't know who has it. But if
Yeah.
they do that, then they know everybody that has it, then they can come and confiscate it.
Yep.
So,
Let's talk about one last case, because this half hour goes real quick, and so I can't get to these two books. We'll do that some other show
okay.
when a guest cancels on us. This one I made notes a while ago. This is from July of 1965 on SERPO. You know, that was that program where 12 astronauts were exchanged for one alien from the planet Serpo in the Zeta Reticuli area. So we gave up 10 men and 2 females for one. Now what happened was that whatever we got from Roswell, there was a communication device. We actually made contact with them. They showed up in 1952. So it took them 5 years or whatever. Yeah, it took 5 years to get here. Well, that's when they replied back, or we were able to make the contact. They arrived here in April of 1964 to retrieve the bodies of the Roswell crash. President Kennedy requested an exchange program called Operation Crystal Night. The astronauts consisted of 2 linguists, 1 biologist, 2 scientists, 2 doctors, a military special op. And these astronauts were selected from people that they didn't have brothers, sisters, or their parents had
Right.
passed away, so nobody would miss them. Now, the only thing with this, I mean, it's a great story. I don't know if you ever read the book. I read it like 2 years ago. You know, it's an interesting story, except you find out that the guy behind a lot of this was Richard Doty.
Who?
Richard Doty. He was the guy, he was really a government inside guy
Right.
who spread a lot of disinformation. So now you don't know what's real. Is this real? He was the one that had met with Linda Moulton Howe that time at Kirkland Air Force Base and convinced her that they were going to go public with UFOs. And she had HBO lined up for a special on this, and she claimed she was showed documents
Right.
about these aliens and stuff. But the more you look into this Richard Doty guy, you find out that he was really, but he worked for the government, but scamming this whole thing, trying to mislead people the way the CIA would do that.
But
you know?
don't you think that the more they mislead you, the more you believe it, the more you look like an idiot, and therefore they can say what they want to say.
Yeah, I mean
It's all disinformation.
Yeah, that's
I
what
mean,
they do. Is well, that's why I said, you know, if you look at the TV shows that are out there right now, you know, MUFON's Hangar 1 was very realistic,
Right.
based on a real case file, and I think, you know, the episodes on underground bases and space weapons really. I sat there and said, "Oh man, they're not going to let us show this."
Right.
And then next thing you know, we're off the air. But look at what's on right now with the UFOs. It's Ancient Aliens.
Right.
Come on. I mean, they regurgitate the same stuff and they make stuff up. You know, Einstein was an alien. Da Vinci was an alien. You know, you got glasses. You can see with these. These were made by extraterrestrials, as Giorgio would say. There's no credibility. But they leave that show alone because they know it's UFO entertainment.
Right,
It's not real. So, and I think that's really what goes on right now, is when you get hit too close, that's not what they want.
There was recently a case that came up, actually was on Phantoms and Monsters, that came up from Connecticut, where allegedly the federal government went in to investigate a guy that had a bunch of sightings. So I pulled it up. Now I can pull up all the cases. And they said it was a hoax, but they never talked to the guy. So I may try to get a hold of him.
Okay.
He left an email. So
Yeah. Well, there's not enough time to go into these. This book we'll talk about in a future episode. Sightings from the TV show Sightings.
Right.
Remember that show? This was one of the reasons I got involved in ufology. But there's some 3 or 4 interesting cases here that I want to talk about. But we're not going to get to it today. We're almost out of time. So I would say, at this point, we need MUFON investigators in the Pittsburgh area.
Right.
We said we wanted to talk about that. We've got the same 5 investigators that were here when I joined. We need to get some new people here in Pittsburgh, Allegheny, Washington, Westmoreland County, Butler, Beaver. I think part of the problem is they join some of these other crypto groups that have 25 members, and they're not joining MUFON because they have these other groups that they go to.
We just got 2 more reports the other day. I gave Sam one, and I think Sam got about 6 of them now. And I gave one to Erie to investigate.
Yeah, well, we definitely, we do this TV show. We do the conference that's in Greensburg. We've been doing that for 10 years now, 9 years. We need people to join, and you would do that at MUFON.com.
Right.
The information for our show is at MUFONPA.com. And but we absolutely need investigators
or
here.
have them get a hold of you or me. I mean,
Yeah.
your email address or
jventry1@comcast.net
or
and
ssalug@aol.com.
and we're both on the MUFON PA site. So some groups. I went to the MUFON symposium. They had been able to have these meetup groups, but it never worked for us. We did the meetups here in Monroeville. And we got 2 people showed up, other than our own people. So, so we're out of time, Fred. We'll be back next month, and we also have some guests in the studio. That's our show. Thanks.